In 2010, a correctional officer in South Carolina named Robert Johnson was getting ready for work when a hitman forced his way into his home and shot him 6 times. Johnson survived, barely. When investigators traced the hit back to its source, they did not find the person who ordered it on the streets. They found him in a cell, inside the very prison where Johnson worked. The murder order had been placed using a contraband cell phone, smuggled into a maximum security facility. The inmate who ordered the hit never left his cell. He did not have to. This is how cartel bosses and organized crime leaders are running empires, ordering assassinations and controlling billion-dollar drug networks from inside American prisons. The most terrifying part is this: the system that is supposed to stop them cannot keep up. To understand how a hit gets ordered from inside a U.S. prison, you first need to accept a simple truth. Prison walls do not stop communication. They just make it harder. For cartels with billions of dollars, harder is a rounding error. The most obvious tool is the contraband cell phone. Estimates suggest that up to 1 in 4 inmates in U.S. prisons has access to an illegal phone. In 2021, officials at one federal prison in Atlanta confiscated 800 cell phones among roughly 1,500 inmates, meaning approximately every other inmate had access to a device. South Carolina prisons have seized over 2,600 contraband phones in a single year. These phones get in through visitors, corrupt guards, and increasingly, through drones that drop packages over prison walls at night. Inside, a single smuggled smartphone becomes a command center. Text messages, encrypted apps, video calls. The inmate does not just call his lawyer, he calls his lieutenant, his enforcer, his sicario. But phones are only one channel. For the highest-level cartel bosses, the methods are more layered and more sophisticated than a burner phone taped under a mattress. Lawyers, for instance, are legally protected under attorney-client privilege. Communications between a prisoner and his lawyer cannot be monitored. Cartel bosses have exploited this for decades. In Mexican prisons, where many of these drug lords were first locked up before extradition, attorneys became the primary pipeline for orders. They would visit under the guise of legal counsel, receive instructions, walk out the front door, and relay those orders to cartel lieutenants on the outside. The messages included everything from drug shipment logistics to kill orders. Ociel Cardenas Guillen is perhaps the most chilling example of a cartel boss who ran his entire operation from behind bars. Cardenas was the head of the Gulf Cartel and the man who created Los Zetas, a paramilitary hit squad made up of former Mexican Special Forces soldiers that became one of the most violent criminal organizations in modern history. When Mexican authorities arrested him in 2003 after a shootout, they put him in La Palma, a federal high-security prison. It didn't matter. From inside La Palma, Cardenas continued to run the Gulf Cartel in full. Through handwritten notes smuggled out by guards and lawyers, he approved executions, ordered the movement of multi-ton drug shipments, signed off on bribes to police forces, and coordinated strategy with allies including Benjamin Arellano Felix of the Tijuana Cartel. His brother Antonio led the day-to-day operations outside, but every critical decision passed through Ociel's cell first. He was a CEO in a concrete office. It took his extradition to the United States in 2007 to finally sever his direct control. And even then, the machine he built kept running on its own momentum. But the Gulf Cartel is far from the only example. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the leader of the Sinaloa cartel, did not just run his organization from a Mexican prison. He ran it luxuriously. Reports and court testimony revealed that Guzman had prison guards on his payroll, smuggled in contraband freely, and received what amounted to VIP treatment behind bars. He continued making strategic decisions for the cartel's operations across 17 Mexican states and into the United States while incarcerated. He was so powerful inside that when he finally escaped in 2001, reportedly by bribing guards to look away while he was wheeled out in a laundry cart, the escape cost him $2.5 million. That is not desperation money. That is a business expense. Guzman was recaptured, escaped again in 2015 through a mile-long tunnel dug directly into his cell shower, and was finally extradited to the United States in 2017. He was convicted in 2019 and sentenced to life plus 30 years. The United States government took no chances. They sent him to ADX Florence in Colorado, the most secure prison on the planet. ADX Florence is where the American government puts people it never wants to hear from again. The facility houses terrorists, spies, and the most dangerous criminals in the federal system. Inmates are locked in soundproof, 7-foot by 12-foot concrete cells for 23 hours a day. Each cell has a single window 3 feet tall and 4 inches wide, facing a wall. Furniture is made of poured concrete. Visits are non-contact, separated by glass. Phone calls are restricted to 1 or 2 approved family members and monitored by the FBI. El Chapo currently lives in a section called Range 13, a special 4-cell wing within the special housing unit reserved for inmates who require the tightest possible control. His only neighbor for years has been a Brooklyn con artist named Jimmy Sabatino. The two communicate by shouting through their steel doors. Every word is recorded by cameras equipped with night vision and audio surveillance, monitored 24 hours a day by both the Bureau of Prisons and the FBI. El Chapo's Spanish is met with Sabatino's broken attempts at translation for the guards. In 2025, their lawyers filed a motion asking that the two be allowed to have recreation time together, a rare glimpse into how total the isolation at ADX really is. El Chapo, once the most powerful drug trafficker on Earth, is now a 67-year-old man in a concrete box, struggling to learn English from a fraudster next door. ADX Florence was designed specifically because of men like Guzman and Cardenas. The entire rationale behind extraditing cartel bosses to the United States was to cut them off from the networks they had built. Mexico's former ambassador to the United States, Arturo Sarucán, said it plainly. The structural weaknesses and corruption in Mexico's prison system allowed these men to keep operating from behind bars. Extraditing them was the only way to degrade that capability. But here's the uncomfortable question. Does it actually work? For the very top-tier inmates at ADX, communication is nearly impossible. The restrictions are severe enough that even the most resourceful criminal has almost no pathways to the outside world. That's by design. But not every cartel leader ends up at ADX. Not every drug lord gets a life sentence. And not every prison is built like a concrete tomb. The reality is, the vast majority of incarcerated cartel members, lieutenants, regional bosses, and enforcers are held in regular federal or state prisons, where security is far more porous. And these are the people who actually carry out the day-to-day operations. They are the ones using smuggled phones to coordinate drug shipments, order hits on rivals, intimidate witnesses, and extort businesses. In Atlanta, the murder of 2 13-year-old boys was ordered by a high-ranking gang member using a contraband cell phone from inside a state prison. In Puerto Rico, a Bureau of Prisons lieutenant named Osvaldo Albarrati Casanas was ambushed and murdered on his drive home after inmates coordinated a hit using phones smuggled into a federal facility. In South Carolina, the deadliest prison riot in recent United States history, 7 inmates killed at Lee Correctional Institution in 2018, was directly blamed on contraband cell phones. The cartel playbook for ordering a hit from prison follows a pattern. It starts with communication, a smuggled phone, a coded letter, or a message passed through a lawyer or a corrupt guard. The order goes to a trusted intermediary on the outside. That intermediary contacts a local cell or hires freelance sicarios. Money moves through informal channels, cash drops, cryptocurrency, or Hawala-style networks. The target is identified, surveilled, and eliminated. The person who ordered the hit never leaves his cell. His fingerprints are nowhere near the crime scene. The chain of command is designed so that even if the shooter is caught, the link back to the prison is almost impossible to prove in court. This is why the Mexican Mafia, a United States-born prison gang, has operated for over 6 decades as one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the country, despite its leadership being almost entirely incarcerated. High-ranking members locked in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day still manage to communicate with associates using methods as simple as tapping coded messages on plumbing pipes, or as elaborate as smuggled letters written in custom ciphers. The Mexican Mafia controls virtually every Hispanic street gang in Southern California, including MS-13 and 18th Street, from inside prison walls. Their foot soldiers number in the tens of thousands. Their bosses sit in cells. So what's being done about it? The Federal Communications Commission has been working on new rules to allow prisons to use targeted signal blocking technology that can disable contraband phones without jamming legitimate cell service for surrounding communities. In 2021, updated regulations made it easier for corrections officials to request that wireless carriers shut off identified contraband devices without needing a court order. Detection technology exists, including systems that can locate phones down to the specific cell they are being used in. But funding remains the biggest obstacle. Most state prison systems can barely afford to staff their facilities, let alone install cutting-edge surveillance technology. And for every phone that gets confiscated, another one gets smuggled in the next day through a hollowed-out shoe, a modified Bible, a drone drop at 3 a.m., or simply handed over by a guard making more from a single delivery than he earns in a week. The deeper problem is structural. American prisons were designed to contain bodies, not to sever networks. A cartel boss sitting in a cell is still a cartel boss. His reputation still commands loyalty. His organization still generates billions. And as long as there is a single crack in the wall, one corrupt officer, one smuggled phone, one coded letter, the orders will keep flowing. Extradition slows the machine. A DX. Florence can silence one man, but the network does not need him to speak. It just needs to know he is still alive. Because in the cartel world, a boss behind bars is not retired. He is relocated. The United States has spent decades and billions of dollars trying to dismantle cartels by locking up their leaders. In some cases, it works. The command structure fractures. Lieutenants fight each other. The organization weakens. But in other cases, too many cases, the prison cell just becomes a new office with worse furniture. And the hits keep coming. If this one made you think, subscribe and hit the bell. We go deep on the stories most channels will not touch. Drop a comment. Should the United States build more supermax facilities, or is there a better way to break the chain of command? We will see you in the next one.